Colombia's former rebel movement FARC is facing heavy losses in legislative elections. It needed to win over a hostile electorate who some say are resentful many of the group's former commanders are not in jail for human rights abuses. Notisia Marquez of the Javeriana University says the right-wing coalition rejects the peace accord, while the left-wing coalition defends it. What the experts say is that accords are bulletproof, but it doesn't mean there can't be initiatives to obstruct some of the measures relating to their implementation. FARC had previously suspended its election campaign, saying its candidates were the target of right-wing elements determined to block its entry into electoral politics. There were WhatsApp chains. People gave their personal data. They were picked up to take them to events and given one day's salary in exchange for sabotage and provocation to start with, but later using stones, sticks and bottles. The former rebels have concentrated their campaign efforts in rural areas, but are trying to win over Colombians in places where they've previously never campaigned, such as theatres and bars. Any place, they say, is a valid one to look for reconciliation. Now we have to carry out an educational campaign in various distinct sectors so we can meet people and they can get to know us. FARC will be here in Congress next term, whatever the results of the ballot. The Havana Pact grants them 5 seats in the lower House of Representatives and another 5 in the Senate. They have renounced, however, their presidential aspirations because of the health problems of their leader, Timochenko.
The Syrian army has reportedly made a significant advance in its effort to retake rebel-held eastern Ghouta. UK-based conflict monitors say troops have cut off the region's biggest town, Douma, and isolated another. If confirmed, the advance would effectively split the region into 3 parts. War monitors, the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, say the army has advanced into half of the town of Mesraba, which, along with a neighbouring village, represents the last link between the northern and southern halves of the enclave. The Syrian government began a major offensive last month to retake eastern Ghouta near the capital Damascus. They now reportedly control half the region, and 900 civilians are thought to have perished in the onslaught.
U2's Bono has said sorry following allegations workers at a charity he co-founded were subject to a culture of bullying and abuse. The 57-year-old singer told the Mail on Sunday newspaper he was left reeling and furious over the harassment claims. Bono has admitted the one organisation failed to protect some employees at its Johannesburg office. Some workers have said they were treated worse than dogs. Created in 2004, One was set up with the aim of fighting extreme poverty and preventable diseases.
We did our first anti-apartheid show in Dublin.
Rescue ships and Libya's Coast Guard picked up several hundred migrants on Saturday. Libyan Coast Guard vessels intercepted 3 migrant boats off Zawiya, just west of the capital, Tripoli. One was an inflatable dinghy with 125 people on board. The second boat was turned back off Garibaldi, east of Tripoli, with 112 on board. The third, carrying 98, was intercepted off Abu Kamesh, near Libya's border with Tunisia. The country is the main departure point for migrants attempting to reach Europe by sea. More than 600,000 have crossed the central Mediterranean over the past 4 years. Thousands more have perished at sea.
A Russian hypersonic missile has been successfully test-launched from a MiG-31 jet. It took off from an airfield in southwest Russia. The Kinzhal missile is said to travel at 10 times the speed of sound and has a range of 2,000 kilometers. President Vladimir Putin, in his State of the Nation speech earlier this month, described the Kinzhal missile as an ideal weapon. Mr. Putin says it's part of a new stockpile of invincible weapons. He says the missile was developed as a response to the US withdrawal from the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty in 2002. The missile launch comes as Russia's presidential elections next weekend are set to return Putin for a fourth term. Experts say he wants to prove to the Russian people that he remains fit to lead after nearly 20 years in power.
He was due to step down in 2023. But now it could be Xi Jinping forever, after China's National People's Congress removed the presidential term limits. The ruling Communist Party put forward the amendment last month, and there was never any doubt it would pass as Parliament is packed with loyal party members. The rubber stamping exercise saw 2 votes against and 3 abstentions, out of almost 3,000 delegates. The government said lifting the term limits is about protecting the authority of the party with Xi at its centre. The limit of 2 5-year terms was written into China's constitution after Chairman Mao's death in 1976 by Deng Xiaoping, who recognised the dangers of one-man rule and the cult of personality.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has suggested he doesn't care about alleged Russian interference in the US presidential elections because the actions were not connected to his government. In an interview with NBC News, Mr. Putin responded abruptly when asked if he condoned the interference that was alleged in last month's US indictment by Special Counsel Robert Mueller. It's all the same to me. To me, it absolutely makes no difference, because they don't represent the government. Couldn't care less. Absolutely, because they don't represent the interests of the Russian state. Putin suggested that some of the 13 Russian nationals indicted by the United States may not be ethnically Russian. He also insisted Russia had neither the tools nor the will to meddle in elections, and complained that Washington had brushed off Russian initiatives to work together on cybersecurity issues. The EU and Japan are urging the United States to exempt them from metal import tariffs to avoid a trade war with the world's biggest economy. Following talks with the US and Japan's trade representatives in Brussels, the EU's Trade Commissioner Cecilia Malmström took to social media and said in a tweet, there was no immediate clarity on how they could be excluded from the measures and that discussions would continue next week. On Thursday, US President Donald Trump set import tariffs of 25% on steel and 10% on aluminium, but he exempted Canada and Mexico. Before the move, the meeting was planned as an opportunity to develop a united front in dealing with China and its alleged overproduction of steel. Traces of a nerve agent used in an attack on the Russian former spy Sergei Skripal have reportedly been found in the Zitsy restaurant in Salisbury. Hundreds of pub-goers and diners have been told to wash possessions as a precaution after the traces were found. Interior Minister Amber Rudd says the government is doing all it can to advance the investigation.
The key thing is, as a government, is that we have made it clear that we will make sure that all the resources are put into this investigation to ensure that it can proceed at speed with all the resources necessary.
British police have identified more than 200 witnesses and are looking at more than 240 pieces of evidence. After an emergency meeting of the country's Cobra Security Committee, Rudd said it was still too early to say with certainty who was behind the poisoning.
Televidente, con Notisia internashonal, nos pasa por un espacio comercial, ahora nos ve en deportes.